My name is Randolph Winters. I'm an author and UFO lecturer. A few years ago, about 1979, I became interested in the UFO phenomena through some beautiful daytime clear photos I saw of UFOs. These pictures came out of Switzerland. They were the result of an investigation by Colonel Wendell Stevens, who was looking into a UFO case which looked phenomenal, better than anything anybody had ever seen. When I saw the pictures, I think I was kind of, not disturbed, but very intrigued by it. And the thought occurred to me that if an intelligent life was coming from someplace else, imagine what we could learn from them. I got a hold of some more of the pictures and eventually got a copy of a photo book that they put out and carried the photo book around, I think, for 5 or 6 years, showing it to friends and relatives, was, very caught up with it. Eventually, because of business, I had a business which took me to Europe frequently, I decided to go to Switzerland and kind of see for myself, get a little closer to the situation and go meet this gentleman who had taken these pictures and see if there was something to be learned there. So I did, went to Switzerland, went to this little remote place up in the mountains called Schmidruti, and met the gentleman whose name was Billy Meier. His full name was Edward Albert Meyer, and he had the nickname Billy because he had a fondness for American movies, mostly country movies or Western movies, and Billy the Kid was his favorite idol, so they called him Billy. So when I met him, I was kind of surprised that he was not a normal person, an everyday person like us, into cars and jobs and Visa cards and everything else. Instead, he turned out to be more like a little guru. I'd already traveled to the East, Asia, China, Japan, and Egypt, kind of looking for, answers to my questions. And when you take those paths around the world looking for spiritual answers to things, you run into spiritual leaders, advisors, and so forth. And Billy Meier turned out to be more like that. He's kind of like the guru you would meet at the top of a mountaintop. He's very quiet, very methodical, and stays home, meditates a lot, and has spent most of his lifetime in his own personal pursuit of spiritual growth. So he's a very pleasant fellow to be around, very likely. And we kind of hit it off, and he invited me to stay with him, which was pretty nice because he had closed the doors on speaking to anybody in about 1984, and I first met him in '86, I think it was, and I was told that he didn't speak to anyone, and so don't expect to even meet the man. But when I got there, he was very friendly. We struck it off. I wound up staying with him for months, living with him at the house, and pretty much had him to myself all day long just to talk and discuss things. And the outshot of that was that I discovered that he'd had contacts for years. He'd even had a whole series of contacts younger in life when he was a teenager. During those years, he had taken pictures and had contacts with a race of people he calls Timmers. And these beings apparently are even from another universe. He has a whole series of black and white photos that he took during those years, 1956 through 1959, I believe it was, in India. And he had been guided by the ETs, he says, to go to India to learn about man, study the philosophies of life, and that there in the Kashmir Valley, which crosses the northern part of India, is, you might say, the stronghold of the real spiritual knowledge on the planet. So he went there to learn. And as a result of all these contacts, Billy had amassed literally thousands of pages of notes of all of his conversations with these beings from other places. Well, he eventually gave me a copy of all those notes. Oh my, there's a stack that high. I mean, it's like 80 pounds to pick it all up. And I, of course, went through all the notes. I was fascinated because in the notes is literally his questions and their answers to just about every subject you could think of. He'd had him, for 3 years, he'd had meetings with him, asking his own questions, other people, other scientists, friends, relatives, local scholars had all sent in questions to ask them. So there was just a little bit of everything in all of these contact notes. Well, I poured over the notes, and then, of course, I had Billy for several months to talk to answer other questions related to it. And the outshot of it was that I learned a lot. It was just kind of what I needed for my own personal growth at the time. When I got back to Los Angeles, which is where I was living at the time that I was going to Switzerland, I made several trips over there. And I came back to Los Angeles, and of course all my friends wanted to hear what happened, what's he like, what did you learn, And I says, well, sure, no problem. We can get together at the house if you want to, and I'll show you some of the pictures and tell you what I've learned from the man. So somebody suggested that I put a little flyer up on the local bookstore we have in L.A. called the Bodhi Tree. So I went down to the Bodhi Tree and tacked up a little flyer on the bulletin board. There would be a meeting at my house Sunday night for anybody who'd like to hear about Billy Meier. I didn't know that too many people would even be aware of who he was. A Come Sunday night, it was kind of humorous. I'd gone to the market because people are coming, so I bought a couple of bags of potato chips and I think a 6-pack of soda or something like that for guests. Well, it turned out to be quite inadequate. People started coming, they kept coming, they kept coming. I had a 3-story house with a spiral staircase in it. I wound up with a whole house full of people, and people lined up down the sidewalk, hanging in the windows. And I was walking around the house with these photos going up and down the stairs, showing them to everybody and explaining what was going on. Hundreds of people showed up. The outshot of it was that there was kind of a demand for more, which led me to start doing a series of classes on his information in Los Angeles. I think it was 3 years I did a class Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night for free in Los Angeles. And I probably went through 16,000 people came to these classes over a 3-year period just to hear the story. And so I found myself in a unique position, just kind of being the mediator, I guess, for this information. Billy doesn't speak in public, never has, and won't even come to the front door to meet anybody. So some of the responsibility just kind of fell on my shoulders, so to speak. I eventually wrote a book called The Pleiadian Mission. The Pleiadian Mission is kind of a condensed form of all of his experiences. The book is not about Billy himself. The book is really about the Pleiadians, who they are, why they came here, and what it is that they wanted to share with us. It primarily concerns itself with history, philosophy, a lot of spiritual information, some information about their world. It's got a good chapter in there on time travel and how the crafts work and so forth. So it's got quite a variety of interesting things in it. Also produced a videotape called the Pleiadian Connection that came out in '87. That tape has been circulated, I think, in just about every country. I still get letters from people in Australia, New Zealand, all over the place. It runs on Saturday nights after the Rocky Horror Show, apparently, in a lot of places. And it's served to educate quite a few people, I guess, about the phenomena. So the tape has been a success in that respect, at opening people's minds up to what the possibilities really are. I think in any time that society makes a change, society is very slow to make changes, because we have to have new knowledges, new experiences, new information before we really move forward in life. We don't take steps in a new direction unless there's mind food for us to make new observations and new decisions about where we're going. You can't just pop up with a new subject and say, hey, we're being visited by extraterrestrials from this little planet up here, and what do you think about this? Well, most people are skeptical, of course, to listen to that because they have no known knowledge on it by which they can even make an opinion. So they generally slough you off as it's crazy or whatever. So you have to start with education. You have to supply people with the information by which they can make some facts. And so that's why I did the book and the talks and the lectures and so forth. As it turns out, these Pleiadians, Billy Meier was told by the people that came in these craft that they were from the Pleiades. The Pleiades is a little cluster of stars located in the Taurus constellation. It's roughly 350 to 400 light years away by our best judgment. I believe our astronomers chart around 2,400 stars at the moment in that system. It's generally regarded as a new cluster with newer suns, and it's questionable as to whether or not there would be very many planets in there that could support human life as we know. Which is interesting since these Pleiadians seem to look just like us. I've seen pictures of them. They could pass in a crowd. They look no different than us at all. They even say that we have common ancestry with them, that historically some of their forefathers are also our forefathers, that on several occasions people came from the constellation Lyra, which is the oldest known area of the human form that they know of. And they say, going back as far as even 22 million years, some of the folks from that Lyra constellation came to Earth. And that's how the white family genetic came to Earth. That originally Earth developed human life on its own, but it was the brown skin race that developed here naturally. The American Indians, the Eastern Indians, these are all descendants of the original brown skin genetic that started on Earth naturally. The other color races that are here, the white race, the black race, we have a blue race that lives underground, the Asian race, which is generally regarded as the yellow race. All of these races came later and were not a natural developing part of the planet Earth. And this is, apparently to the Pleiadians, this is one of the more fascinating parts of our planet. They can look into our spiritual self, and by spiritual I mean the same thing as soul. They say within our spiritual subconscious there's kind of a roadmap or information in there that allows them to read about our origins, number of lifetimes, the path of discovery, knowledge that the individual has been on. There's a lot of things in there that they can tell about that particular spirit form. And in doing so, they can tell that quite a few people here on Earth are of the same family genetic that they also were descendants of these people from Lyra. They just split off on their own a long time back and colonized some other planets. Now they've come in contact with us here on Earth and kind of look at us like long-lost brothers. So that seems to be the connection. They have stated over and over again that they are not interested in getting involved in our political or our power structures. It seems to be nothing more than really an observation. Just a handful of them seem to be coming from the Pleiades. Maybe it's like their Peace Corps or some anthropologist or something, or some scientists from the Pleiades that are just interested in us. They don't get involved beyond, they do admit that they broadcast visions and ideas to people, maybe as many as 20 or 30,000 people at any given time. These visions and ideas seem to be sent from some sort of remote disk that are in our atmosphere. The people that pick them up usually get it in their sleep or during meditation when their minds are open, clear, and in balance. I don't have any idea how or which people are selected or for what reasons, but they do seem to be intervening at that level. So they are instilling people with visions and ideas, which moves them down a road of discovery. So they are taking somewhat of a hand, kind of in their own way, at gently guiding us, hopefully, towards a better time. They don't seem to have anything on their mind other than maybe just lending us some knowledge that they think might be helpful. I don't see it any different as when we perhaps go into a new continent, new area, come across a tribe of Indians or something living in a, in a remote area in Africa or someplace, and we try to be of some benefit to them. Maybe we let them benefit from our medicine. Maybe we give them a few books, try to add to their culture, do what we can to try to help them out. But we generally try to not completely change or corrupt their society. At least we hope we don't. And I think possibly they're kind of doing the same thing with us. I've been told that they do watch over the Earth. They even have, not satellites, but they apparently have some sort of listening and warning devices that orbit the planet. It serves to operate as a warning to other extraterrestrials who may fly into the planet, that this planet is being watched over and observed, affords us a certain measure of protection from other races that might not have our best interest at heart, and allows them to scan or observe us. I think we're kind of being studied as a civilization. They find us fascinating that we're overpopulated. There's over 5 billion people. They think we are a completely illogical, insane society. They cannot understand why we go to such efforts to kill each other, hurt each other, and take advantage of each other. We will do most anything to get ahead at the expense of someone else. And most of us are kind of aware of that. I can imagine what it must look like to them coming from a world that's as advanced as theirs is. I was fascinated with the pictures when I first saw them, the crafts themselves. And I know many people challenge the whole concept that someone could be coming from another planet, because how could it be possible scientifically to even fly from one place to another in the universe? It's so vast and it's so big, if you had a craft that went the speed of light, that it would take you, possibly hundreds, maybe even thousands of years to get anywhere. So to some people, they find the possibility of ET life coming here impossible just based on that standard. We don't know, our level of science is that we don't know any way of projecting solid matter faster than the speed of light. We don't even know how to send it that fast. We are aware that there's something called the mass-speed correlation, that if you accelerate any form of matter, it will begin to implode upon itself because of pressure as you speed it up. So by our science today, we don't know of any way of even accelerating particles several 100,000 miles an hour, probably without a lot of damage. They seem to have had a breakthrough in technology, just like we have. It was only 100 years ago or so, we were sailing tall ships from Europe to Americas. Well, we didn't create faster sailing ships, we came up with airplanes. Then we had a breakthrough into jet rockets, and then we've gone to look into the moon and some of the other planets. They've had advancements in technology where they are now converting matter back into an energy form. They take the craft and its crew, fly out into open space. The craft is converted into a non-material form that they call fine matter. That fine matter is contained with programming that allows the craft to go somewhere else in the universe in an energy form where it is not affected by time. Time is a pulse energy which causes the rotation, movement, and animation in matter. It stabilizes the subatomic particles so all of the elements hold together. That's what we consider a reality. If you could step outside of reality, you would not be affected by time. So you could literally accelerate to any place you wanted to go. Time would not seem to exist, and you could re-enter someplace else, and no time would have passed, is the general theory. They seem to be doing that. They convert these crafts into an energy form. They step outside of reality in this non-material form. The non-material fine matter form contains programming on where to go in the universe. They go to that destination. The craft comes back into reality. It's converted back into a solid form, and they've gone anywhere they want to in the universe, seemingly instantaneously. So it's certainly a breakthrough in technology that will be, extraordinary for us once we get to that step. Our scientists, many of our border scientists, are working with the theory of breaking into what is called hyperspace or leaving our reality. So it's certainly a concept which is not beyond our understanding or the thinking of many of our current day scientists. Many have been working on it for several years. So we could be possibly in 100, 200 years from now, who knows? We may be skipping around the universe right behind them somewhere or showing up at their home planet. So. We were told, or Billy Meier was told by the Pleiadians, that they had observed Earth actually for several thousands of years. But towards the end of the 16th century, around 1680, 1685 sometime in there, apparently a group of them, maybe as many as 250 to 300 of them, came here and built underground facilities to observe us. They were watching the development of our civilization and could see we were moving into a big time of change. Two kinds. One, technically we were advancing, where they could, for thousands of years went by and we hardly advanced at all. We were in horses, wagons, and carts, and we didn't advance hardly at all technically for long periods of time. But they were able to tell that our society was moving towards its industrial years where technology would come into play and it would change the course of events. So they wanted to study and observe that. The reason for it is they say that they and other races who are out there who have these tremendous technologies have kind of a hands-off code between them where they don't interfere in a planet as long as it's confined to its own world. Once the inhabitants of a planet are capable of leaving their solar system and flying out into open space, then we're going to come face to face with them and other races, and we will come under their jurisdiction, so to speak, and have to go along with their laws. As long as we're within our own solar system, they don't get involved. We can do whatever we want on our own planet. But they're not going to let us go flying out there with our guns and our rockets and our bad attitudes. It just isn't going to happen, they say. So they have been very interested in observing us and seeing how we're going to develop as a race. There's another very interesting phenomenon that is happening that technically moves into an area of knowledge that we're really not very aware of. Our planet, planet Earth, and our solar system of 9 planets around our sun is moving on its own giant orbit, which takes about 25,860 years to complete. We apparently have just gone all the way around one of these gigantic orbits and have kind of like on a Monopoly board, we've just passed go again. We're kind of back at a starting point. They say that the next 800 years are very critical, that our entire solar system is moving in closer proximity to several types of radiations from central suns. And because of that, there are step-ups in energy fields which affect all life forms. They think we have about an 800-year window of opportunity as a civilization to become more peaceful, to raise our consciousness, as the expression goes, literally just kind of wake up and become more responsible with our own growth. If we do, they see us surviving and moving on, joining up with a family of man in the universe and, possibly actually living a quality life here on this planet. If we do not, they say if we bypass these 800 years and do not attain some sort of peaceful living on this planet, that just the opposite will probably happen. Our civilization will probably fall into wars and despair, and we may vanish as a civilization. In studying our planet and others, they see that civilizations typically last about 8,000 to 10,000 years. They seem to come along grow, develop, get to a high level of technology, and if, when we get to that high level of technology, we have not earned the responsibility with which to deal with it properly, it's generally used for the wrong reasons and civilizations perish. So if this next war, if we have another one, if we don't become peaceful and learn something out of that, the war after that literally may be with bows and arrows again. So they're trying to warn us to some extent, you know, to literally grow up. When I had a lot of time with Billy to ask questions, I was pretty fascinated with the idea that how did we all get here? You know, it never seemed right to me that all of us evolved on this planet, all these different colors, races, and obvious different levels of evolution on this planet. There had to be some explanation for it. Billy was told by the Pleiadians that many different races have come here and seeded Earth on several occasions. That the Pleiadians themselves were descendants of a race of people from the constellation Lyra. They came here approximately 389,000 years back. Large groups of them came here at that time. They came on 4 or 5 separate occasions, several hundred thousand of them at a time. The Asian race, which is here on Earth, they say is the oldest race as far as number of lifetimes. The Asian people, averaged out, have lived more incarnations, more physical lifetimes than anybody else on the planet. So on the evolutionary scale, they are older than the rest of us. They don't know the origin of the Asian race, how it got to Earth. They know it did not originate here, but they don't know which systems that it may have come from. The black race, some of the black race came from Sirius. We have a blue race that lives in subterranean areas. There's a community under France, and there's a city also in the Himalayas, underneath the Gobi Desert. They have a blue skin. These are the descendants of the people who once lived in Atlantis, which were primarily from the Vega and Lyrian constellations. So we have different groups of people that have come from many different places. They can only explain probably half to 2/3 of the population on the planet. They say so many of the other people have come from so many different places, they really don't have much of a clue. They can't figure it all out. They're mostly familiar with their family genetic, which is the Lyrian, which most of us here on this planet are. Many people have been concerned about previous civilizations or societies, even here on Earth. Was Atlantis real? Was there anything before Atlantis? Are we going through just a series of civilizations where, that they're all buried underground someplace? They say that's true, that there's been quite a few civilizations previous to ours here on Earth. If we go back about 50,000 years, they say there was a very well-educated, knowledgeable leader named Pleiadian who came to Earth and brought with him thousands of his own people. And Pleiadian at that time was revered, what we would revere as a god. He had lived so long, so many lifetimes, had garnered so much wisdom about the material and spiritual realms that he was not creating spirits, but his knowledges were so vast, he was revered as a wonderful leader and a god of people. And the people that followed him here, thought he was a great guy. He had a civilization that lasted for almost 10,000 years. It dates back, I believe, from about 50,000 to 40,000 years back. It was a very peaceful, quiet civilization. Apparently, they colonized much of the earth and lived here very well. The local inhabitants at the time, which is interesting, thought that Pleiadian was God. He was so revered by the local people, the brown-skinned race that were living here in small tribes on Earth at the time, that there were stories among them that this Pleiadian could float. If he moved by a tree, it would start growing better, and if you were sick in his presence, he could just move his hand and they would be healed. And, they revered him as the god. And it was actually, they say, during this time period when Earth man created the concept of a physical god being born in their likeness. And they thought Pleiadian was the god and creator of all men. That's how it started here on Earth, the kind of concept of a physical god. Pleiadian lived for several thousand years. When he passed away, apparently his civilization that he had founded lasted a little bit longer, eventually fell into wars and dissipated. And there was a period on Earth for several thousand years when there was practically nobody here except a few scattered tribes. Then about 33,000 years back, they say, was the beginning of what we would think of as the Atlantean period. People who constantly are looking into old information, trying to support the idea that Atlantis existed. They say Plato was very accurate. The old books that Plato wrote about the existence of Atlantis were fairly accurate. he was only off 1,000 years when Atlantis actually ended. Atlantis started by a Vegan man from the Vegan constellation called Atlant, they say, and he had a wife named Caratide. And Atlant and Caratide came to Earth. They were very peaceful leaders. A lot of people came with them. Earth flourished. It became a good place to come, a good place to live. Caratide's father, whose name was Muris, came, founded a colony in the Gobi Desert. And the city that they built around Muris was called Mu. And the kingdom of Mu grew, much like the British Commonwealth did years ago, and they founded colonies all over the planet. The kingdom of Mu later became to be called Lemuria, and that's how that started, they say. So we had two kind of large societies living on Earth from 33,000 years back until 94, 98 BC, and that was the kingdom of Lemuria and the Atlantis kingdom, which did exist, they say, where the Atlantic Ocean is now. So it actually did exist. It was there. It was real. Eventually it came to its demise. They had a tremendous war and destroyed themselves. When the war broke out, they actually cracked the plate that goes down through the Atlantic Ocean. The axis of the planet shifted. If you can imagine Earth and see where Florida is right now, grab Earth with your hands and roll Florida up to where Greenland is now. And that was the position, they say, that Earth was in at that time. The great wars between Atlantis and Mu were so powerful that it literally turned us on our axis. The water rose up, flooded all over the Mediterranean area, most of northern Africa. These were great floods that submerged in Egypt, and the erosion from that actually can be seen around the Sphinx during that time period. And I believe, I have to look up to be sure, but I think that was 10,800 years ago. I have to check to be sure on that. And for about a 50-year period of time, there was hardly anybody on the surface of Earth. The atmosphere was unbreathable. Most everybody who did survive was driven underground to live in subterranean areas until the air became breathable, until you could get back out on the surface again. And that's what drove people underground, and the descendants of those people who went underground, many of them are still living in subterranean areas today. Earth then went through a long period of several thousand years where there was practically no one here but just a few nomadic tribes wandering around. Then the three great races of Earth were pulled together and formed, which were the Indian races. Then you had the Hebrew nation, which was pulled together, and there were some other races over around the Caspian Sea. You had 2 or 3 different groups of people who were pulled together, and then the modern civilization that we're living in now actually found its roots back then around 6,000 years ago. So we've had quite a colorful history in the past that probably will be revealed more and more to us as our technology advances and we can really discover all the things for ourselves that have happened here on Earth. I'd asked Billy if he'd ever been back to the Pleiadian planets or had any idea what their lifestyle was like. He said he had visited there in 1984 just for a few days. That was one of his last physical contacts that he had with the Pleiadians. And that they had taken him back there. He had spent a few days there, been able to see the planet. The planet itself is very similar to Earth as far as oceans, clouds, continents. It's primarily a water planet, very similar to Earth. He said that they had forests, vegetation, farms. You know, you could almost believe that you were on a planet, although like Earth. Except that he saw a lot of plants that he had not seen before. They had food types there. They had animals that he had not seen before. Variations of our rabbit, for instance. They had variations of horses and cows that they had brought from Earth and changed. They had also picked up animals from other worlds that he had never seen before. So it must have been pretty fascinating. But their planet was very similar. They could breathe the atmosphere fine. He said the atmosphere, instead of being blue like ours, is more of a green color. That the people that live there, they've lived so many lifetimes, they're so much older than us, that the way they live is quite different. There is no government. They don't have any sort of elite or political system. They don't even have an economic system. They've reached a level of spirituality where they work together so well that they literally just share all of the stuff, the essence and the materials of the planet based on more of a wisdom system. The people that are most capable of doing things do those particular tasks. Whatever you're capable of doing, all you have to do is put your time in. Their day is similar to ours. It's almost 24 hours. It's a little shorter than ours. But Billy said each person is required to spend 2 or 3 hours a day is some sort of commitment to community, whatever they happen to be good at doing. And when you put your time in, you get the stuff that you need. There is no economic system where you buy a house or whatever. If you need a home, they provide you with one. It's not important how big it is or what it looks like, just whatever you would happen to like. They're not selfish, they're not greedy, they're not materialistic at all. This is just kind of the opposite. They spend more time helping other people out than they do themselves. Greed doesn't seem to exist, and jealousy doesn't seem to exist there, he said, which was very refreshing. The beam ships, we call them beam ships because they have two drive systems. One of the drive systems is a light emitting system, and so consequently Billy gave it the expression that it was a beam ship, somehow propelled by some sort of light mechanism, which he didn't understand too well. But the second system is this matter converting system, where they can actually convert the ship into other forms of energy instead of solid matter, which they propel themselves somehow around the universe. Seems to be more of a matter displacement device than anything else. It's not really a propulsion system. The crafts are, the average craft that we see, and most all of Billy's pictures, are 21 feet in diameter. They are made for the particular individual. They don't have computers on board of chips and wires and so forth like ours are. They have intellectually progressed in their technology way beyond where we are at. They have, I guess you would say, artificial organic material that contains intelligence. They create something like what we would think of as androids or something that actually run the craft. The craft has consciousness, it can think, it can talk, and it can take care of all the matters of propelling the craft. There are 3 seats in them. There's a big console that has several small viewing screens. I've seen one picture of the inside of the ship. It had 9 viewing screens in banks of 3s, and it had 3 of these big swivel seats that look like a big comforter you might have to watch TV in. They're tall seats that come up almost to your back of your head, and they look like swivel seats, although I couldn't be sure in the picture. So the functions of the craft seem to be very similar to something that we might design here, with a console with viewing screens and knobs and things to push and so forth. You know. So it can be operated by fingers and hands just like something that we would do here. There is no feeling of movement in the craft. The craft creates its own specific gravity. So when you're inside the ship, there is no feeling in the ship related to the gravitational field of Earth or whichever planet that you might be on. Apparently, if you could kind of envision a round craft right here, a saucer-type craft, the energy of the craft comes out the bottom of the disc, seems to come around and be pulled back into the top. And because of that, the craft and its occupants are kind of in the middle of some sort of energy field. That creates its own specific gravity. So when you're inside of the ship, you are specific only to that gravitational field. So you're kind of flying in a bubble of sorts. Billy says when you're in the craft, the thing can be going tremendous speeds, and you have no idea how fast it's going. You have to look out a window or something to even see if you're moving, and sometimes then you can't even tell if you're out in space. But they can be making right-angle turns or flying upside down relative to Earth or anything, and you have no idea. There's no awareness. In some of his movie footage, Billy took, I think, 8 or 9 separate sequences of movie footage of the crafts. And in some of those, the craft is just hanging, looks like it's just floating around or sitting on its side. And he says it doesn't make any difference inside the ship, which is kind of a strange way for us to think, you know. But we have to, as we learn more about gravitational fields and field energy, that'll become more commonplace to us. When the Pleiadians view Earth, they seem to be most interested in our, what we would call our spiritual growth here. When they see our planet and examine all the billions of people that are on it, they look at us kind of like an illogical society. They think we're spiritually stagnant, that we just don't know enough about life in the universe to be living correctly spiritually. And maybe they're right. Maybe that's why we're having so much trouble living peaceful with each other and with nature, that we have so many different viewpoints, power structures, religions, and belief structures on this planet that all are fighting, you know, to hang on to their followers, and nobody wants to let go of it. And most all of them are wrong. You know, true spirituality is an individual's person's connection to the creative source, whatever you may think that is. They have tried, because they see how spiritually stagnant we are, they've given Billy a lot of information about how the universe actually is put together and how the life forms proliferate in it. They're trying to get across the idea to us really that we are a spiritual being. Our soul is really a spiritual force that goes through a series of material lifetimes in order to evolve. We're not really a material being. This is just one cycle in an ongoing, long, infinite life of our spiritual self, which is a non-physical form. Each time we go through a physical lifetime, hopefully we gain some wisdom from that lifetime. We have all these experiences we go through in life, learning things. When wisdom from our experiences is correct according to creation, it is added to our spiritual self. It moves forward from lifetime to lifetime as the accumulated wisdom that goes with us. As we all go down our own individual paths of discovery and things that we're looking for that we need for ourselves, it makes us very unique. We're all out looking for different things at different times. That's why one of the big lessons, I think, in this particular lifetime or this era we're living in right now is to recognize that we are spiritual beings on different paths, and this person over here may need to explore these ideas or dress this way or look that way. He's figuring out things that he needs for himself. We shouldn't be passing judgment against each other or getting ahead at the expense of each other just because we're all unique. There's a general push on our planet to conform, to be the same, to stay in step, do what you're told, think this particular way, do as you're told here, or follow this religion or that one. And that's against the free spirit. The spirit needs to be free to go out and explore on its own, unhampered by any sort of bias, control, religion, or power structure. And they see that as a major problem on our planet, that we're just not going to be peaceful, and we're not going to learn to get along until as individuals we break free of all of this dogma on our planet and become peaceful spiritual beings ourselves. Well, this isn't new stuff. I mean, people in the East have been, trying to tell everybody that for thousands of years, but of course those are savages to the Western world, so why should we pay any attention to them? But it's basically coming down to be the truth. People need to learn to look inward into meditation, to discover more about themselves, and become a spiritual being themselves. Get in touch with their own spirit. Once they do that, there's a breakthrough because once you get in touch with your spiritual self, you connect with the creative force or God force, whichever you want to call it that. And then there's a big spiritual breakthrough. There's an awareness of self and your connection to the creational source, and it makes a difference in people. It's a spiritual experience, and it changes you. Some people have near-death experiences, and they get in touch with the creational source, and it changes them forever. And anybody can actually do this without having to experience a near-death experience. You can do it in meditation. If you take the time to become clear, to turn off the noisy thought process of the physical mind and meditate and get in balance with your spiritual self, some amazing things happen. Not only are you happier, luckier, you also become more powerful in life because you lose fear. You're no longer controlled by emotional problems. We're a very fear-based society that is, most people are just pushed through their life by outside forces. Very few people really are in control of their lives. They get up every morning, they go to work because they're told, they drive this kind of car because it looks good, they wear these kind of clothes because the advertisements make say that's cool. We're not really free. We're going through life being pushed around and controlled by systems on our planet. And we don't need to be. We could all get up tomorrow morning and say, we're just not going to do this anymore. Burn the house down, throw the money away, get rid of the cars, and build a new kind of society that makes more sense. But people don't do that because they're afraid of losing their money or their house or their car, or afraid they'll be ridiculed by other people. They don't do these things. So they're really losing their free will, and they're really becoming more and more victims of the society that we live in. Free will is vanishing very quickly. When I met Billy, I was pretty curious why this particular fellow. I mean, Billy's a nice fellow, but he's not extraordinary by any means. He's just an average person of average intelligence. He's a small-town fellow. Grew up in the countryside of Switzerland. So it's pretty interesting why him. Well, he has his own explanation for that. Billy says that his spirit was brought to Earth by the Pleiadians thousands of years ago to be a contact person. that there has been an ongoing mission for over 10,000 years by the Pleiadians and other races to slowly guide Earth towards a more peaceful existence, and that that he volunteered a long time ago to help with this mission. And he will have a material lifetime. His spirit passes over to the other side. The other side, by the way, is just a band of energy around the earth. Our spirit doesn't fly off into space. There is no heaven or hell. There's no value judgments. There's nobody waiting at gates, and there's no God that passes judgment on you. All that's ridiculous stuff. It doesn't exist. Your spirit simply goes to sleep, floats up into this band or field of energy around the planet, and rests. He says that the Pleiadians coerce his spirit. By that I mean they pull it out of the other side and bring him into physical lifetime when they need him. He believes that he's had several lifetimes in a similar capacity as a contact person working with him, and that he has 3 more lifetimes to do this. And when those 3 lifetimes are up, which will take through the next 800 years, then he will be returned to the planet where his spirit originally came from, and his mission will be over. This first picture here is what we believe to be a Pleiadian beam ship. There are several variations or types of them, but primarily we've seen 2 main designs over and over again. They've been photographed by Billy on hundreds of occasions. They've even been photographed by many other people in different parts of Earth. We've seen these round metal discs in almost every country on the planet. What you're looking at is a Pleiadian craft capable of time travel, and this is one of those 21 feet in diameter ships.